So in our last video, we learned how to use a CMS, content management system, to set up our cast cards to hover and rotate and connect all of the information that we stored in the CMS and design it accordingly. Now we're going to do another little CMS for a trivia section in our Titanic site, and we'll have a little hover effect that reveals the answer to the trivia question. We'll even put a little Lottie animation at the bottom, and we'll even have a little animation for our ship passing by as the user scrolls. Stick around and we'll build this out together. Alright, so back in here you can see we have our trivia section. This is the completed version, and we have little questions here in these little circles, and these are all connected to our CMS for our trivia questions. So it's just two fields. It's going to be a question and an answer, and when the user hovers over the question, what day did the Titanic sink, you see the answer, and there's a little iceberg back there too, a little design, and then there's a little Lottie animation of some waves happening beneath here, and as the user scrolls we see the ship passing by. Okay, so let's jump right into that. So back in our site, last thing we did was our cast section. I'm going to make sure I'm in the body. I'm going to add a new section. I'm going to call this trivia section. I'm going to give it a fixed height so we can see what we're doing for a minute. 1000 pixels, good. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is back to our CMS. You see our casts from before. We've got those 10 items, the 10 characters and actors. But now I'm going to add a new one. This one will be called trivia questions. So right now on the right, you'll see all we have is a name and a slug. Slug again is just the kind of URL, the backslash at the ends where that thing would be found, but we don't worry about that too much. Custom fields. First I'm going to edit the name. I'm going to make sure this says question. And then new field, it's going to be text. And it'll be answer. That's it. Question and answer. Easy. No pictures, no fancy links or anything. Save collection. And again, you can add some placeholder ones if you don't have your information right away. Say you're waiting for a client to send you images or content, you can just put some fake ones that'll generate for you. Webflow does that nicely. But right now, what we see here, let's get our first question. What day did the Titanic sink? And then the answer, of course, see if you know it really quick. And if you said April 15th of 1912, then you were right. That is the tragic morning, the early hours that Titanic sank into the Atlantic Ocean. Create. Great, that's our first question. Next one, just gonna do, what game is Jack playing when he wins his ticket for Titanic? And the answer is Fortnite. Poker. Yes, poker. Create. All right, I'm just going to bounce ahead and write the rest of the questions really quick. I'll see you in a sec. Okay, we're back, and I've got the questions here. There's just 6 of them, not too many. And we're going to go back to our section over here. So we've got trivia section. First thing I want to do is add a container. Make sure everything stays centered. I'll make the height of this 100% so it stretches out. I will add a collection list wrapper. So right here, there we go. And right now it's asking what we want to attach this to, and we only have 2 options. It's the cast and the trivia questions. Obviously we want trivia for this, and you'll see our questions immediately pop up. So now we can affect each of these items and style them, and when we style just one of them, we're working on the left side here in our navigation. When we style that one, it'll trickle down and style all of the items in our CMS, which saves us tons of time. So in our individual collection item, I'm going to add a div, so it gives us more control over styling and spacing. I'll name this trivia div. I'm going to give this a width and a height of 300 just to make a perfect square here. And when I go down to border radius, this adds some curvature for boxes and things common with buttons. But a nice trick, if you've got a square that's evenly spaced on all sides and you give it a border radius of 50%, you get a nice circle. And you can't tell right now, but if I gave this a background color, you'll see there, we've got a nice beautiful circle. But I want this to be something else, so I'm going to get rid of that color. Instead, I'm going to give it a linear gradient here. Click linear, first color, I'm going to click that ocean color that we had. Second color, Going to give it a value of 2F2141. There we go, nice deep blue. And if I go to collection list over here, right now everything is stacked on top of each other, but if I make sure I'm highlighting the list and I click grid, woohoo! Grid saves the day again, evenly spaces out everything. We've got the 6 things, or 6 items, and you see how they're all pushed to the left. If I just go to collection item, I can align these just in the center. Just press justify center, I can do align center. Great, so in our trivia div, I'm going to add another div. This will be called question container. I'll make its width and its height 100% of its container. Oops, not $100, 100%, yes. There we go, so now it's the same height as the circle. I will add some text in here. And get text, see now it's prompting us, what do we want this information to come from? And if I get it from trivia questions, this one will be the question, right? There we go, and you see all of our questions appear. Let me just give this a class that will then style to all of our questions. And I can make this white. Here we go, I'll make text centered there. And then in question container, I can make this flex vertical, align and justify center, and then it pops up right into the middle there. And you see how it bleeds out a little bit? I can even give it some padding on the left and right sides. Hold down Alt to affect left and right. And just look at all of them, make sure that each one looks okay. Maybe 40 is good. For the ones that are a little bit longer, it shows that there nicely. Great, centers that in there. Amazing. Now we're going to do something similar that we did with our cast section, how when you hover over the actor, the cast member image fades into view, and it's just positioned absolutely behind it. So we can do the same with our question and answers. So I've got trivia container, or question container in our trivia div. I will also add answer container, or answer div. Okay, so our answer div will have similar properties here. I'm going to make it 100% height and 100% width of its container. Oops, that's pixels. Make sure that's percent. Great. But now you see how it's pushing down below. So let's make sure our question container is positioned relatively. And we can make sure that our trivia div is also positioned relatively, because now when we tackle our answer div, it'll look for the most relative parent, and the parent of the answer div is the trivia div. So when we position the answer div absolutely, but if we click the full display for the absolute, it finds the nearest parent container that's positioned relatively, which is our trivia div, and then it'll display itself fully with inside that. So now it's right behind it. So when I click question container and I hide this, that's technically the answer div, but we still got to attach our answer to it. So in answer div, let's press plus. I will do text, and I'm going to get the text from answer. Great, and I'm going to give this answer class. So now they're all going to be white. Make sure I'm in the answer div, and we'll do the same flex vertical, so they're centered there. And now if I go to the answer div and I give it a z-index of -1, it'll disappear behind the other one that's on top of it, because it has a higher z-index. And now the answer is stacked behind the question. Right, so we have our trivia div that contains our question container. I'm going to make sure the background is the same linear gradient as the other one. So this is the ocean that fades into 2F2141. Okay, and I'll name this, change this to answer container. Just keep it consistent. So I've got answer container, and this guy is positioned relative. The parent is positioned relative. I'm going to make sure the question has a z-index of 1, just so it'll stay above the answer when we create this. So answer container, make sure it's positioned absolutely. It covers fully its parent container, so that is the trivia div. So it'll take up the full space, but behind the other one. When I click plus, I'm going to add another div within the answer container. I'm just going to name this iceberg background. Give it a width and a height of 100%. And images, I'm going to select the upright iceberg here. Okay, I'll do cover, center. All right, and then inside that iceberg, so we've got answer container iceberg here. That's a div, right? It has a background of the iceberg. So I also want the answer text in here. So get text from trivia questions. I'm going to select the answer. Great. So now our answer should pop up here. And if we just go to the wrapper, which is the iceberg, I'll make sure this is displayed flex, vertical, center, center, so our answer appears in the middle. And I'll click on this text block here, give this a class of answer. I'll make the color white. The text is a little larger at 40 pixels there. And now when I go to the question container, what we want to happen is when the user hovers over the question after they think they know the answer, beneath it, we will have a hover styling and we'll change the opacity to 0. So then you see the answer and the iceberg appears in the div that's stacked absolutely behind it. Great. We'll go back to the base state of question container and make sure we got the transition set. Great. It'll ease. And then you'll see, yeah, the answer appears. Looks a little big though, so let me change the answer. 40 is too big, I'll make it maybe 32. Looks good, everything still fits, but it's a little more bold. There you go, so the structure's seems a little tricky, but we've got our trivia div, which is inside our collection item. So we always put a div inside of a collection item, usually just to style it and have more control over it, right? And then beneath it, we have two other divs, question container and answer container. Now they are both stacked on top of each other. The question container is in front of the answer, so that way when it disappears, you'll see the answer right behind it. And all the question container contains is the trivia question that we're pulling from our CMS. And then the answer container. And you'll see here an answer container. I actually just went back and cleaned it up a little bit. I put the iceberg background as the answer container's background. I don't know why I added an extra div there. Sorry about that. But so now we've cleaned up answer container, has the background div of the iceberg, and then the answer text is right there. It still has the same effect, still hovers right over. So if we didn't have overflow on the trivia div, you'd see how it would be a square, and the iceberg is all ugly. So when we click overflow hidden, trivia div contains all the content we need. Now I'm just going to go to trivia section. I'm going to add a heading. I will make this an H1, give it a class of section heading. Change this to trivia. And then rearrange its order right here on the side in our navigator. There it is. Put this above the container in the trivia section. Maybe go back to our cast and add some margin on the bottom here just to give some separation. 100 pixels maybe. Okay. So I'm just going to add our Lottie animation to the bottom here. So make sure we're in our trivia section. And I'm going to click plus. New Lottie animation. So we go to settings and we can replace the Lottie sequence. I've got these blue waves here. Nice dark blue waves, the black background that blends in with our body. I'm going to make sure this is looping, right? Because we don't want it to stop after one cycle through. Great. And then I'm going to turn this around so it looks like there actually are waves. So if I just go to transforms down here, go to rotate on the x-axis 180 degrees, flips that guy around. And if we go to settings, preview, they are waving nicely. Great. I'm just going to give this a class name as well. Trivia waves, I will call it. I'm going to make this positioned absolutely as well. And then I'll make the width 100% of its container. And that way it allows for some overlap if needed, especially because now we're going to add a boat on top of it. A ship, not a boat. So I'm going to click image here. Where are we? Image. And I'm going to choose the image. I'm going to make sure our ship is selected. There we are. And you see how it's overlapping a little bit? That's because the ship is static, and so it's in the document flow of this section. But the waves are absolutely positioned in the document flow. And if I make the section itself, trivia section, relative, now the waves will respond to that. So if I put them on the bottom, they'll be on the very bottom of that section. If I put them on the top, they put them up there, which we don't want, obviously. So now when we make this also positioned, absolutely, I'll call this trivia ship. I'm going to go back to our section. Right now we have a fixed height, but if we change this to auto, it'll expand. Great. So right now the ship is also positioned absolutely, but if we give it a position on the bottom here, it'll fade right into the waves. We don't want it to be drowning, right? We want it to actually be riding the waves. So let's give some margin bottom to our collection list. That way it pushes us down. Great, we can have some overlap there. We can give the boat, let's see, let's go to our ship here. Let's give this a margin bottom as well. That way it rises up out of the water slightly. You can also resize. You see how it floats a little bit? That might be too high. Let's lower this back in. So now if we change this size, it'll always be on the water looking like great. And it's behind the questions, which we want. So we can select our ship too and give it a nice little animation. So on scroll, so let's see, while scrolling in view, it'll move across our screen. So place scroll animation. We're gonna add a new one. This will be trivia ship scroll. And let's say it's 0%. It's kind of where it is right there. Off to the left. And then at 70, let's say, we can move it along the x-axis to travel to the right. You can write 1,000 here. I can even make it 2,000, 3,000. All right, so then let's see, I scroll up a little bit, live preview's on. Trivia section comes into view, and we see our boat scrolling across the screen. And that's as far as we can go because the section doesn't go any larger. But once there's another section below it, it'll keep scrolling across. So now it just gives it a little bit of life. And we can make sure this is ease, so it's not so jagged when we're scrolling. And last thing, we just go to our section here and have this fade in with the rest of the content. We've done this a few times. So this will be our all elements in. We're going to add this as part of that interaction. So with our trivia section selected, we're going to hide and show this. So display none initially, and after the 3-second delay, it will fade in with the rest of them. Display flex or block, doesn't really matter. Oh, it's block. There we go. So now I'm going to preview this page. It'll load, and then 3 seconds go by. Video starts. All these elements fade in. Scroll down here. Things flip. We've got our grid. We've got our rotating quotes. We've got our cast section with the images behind it. Our necklace. And we've got our trivia section as well. And look, there's our boat scrolling. We've got our faded answers here too. Wonderful. And that's how we hooked up our CMS to our trivia questions and added those hover cards again, show the absolute positioning behind, and fades into view nicely. Got our scrolling boat and Lottie animation at the bottom to give the section a little more life. In the next video, I'm just going to build out a little gallery of images with some promotional content from the movie and pictures and a little trailer just in another grid system to get more practice with that. And we're reaching the end of the Titanic site, guys. It's just a few sections, so stick around. We're going to do that next.